Welcome to the Grit Diaries with Mon and Maz, a place where we share real stories meets real transformation. Each episode, we share the journeys of everyday people who's faced life's hardest moments and found their way to hope, healing, and purpose. May their courage inspire you and in the world around you. Let's get inspired. We have just finished up an interview with the incredible Lindsay Ziehl, who's come to us from South Africa. She's a two-time cancer survivor. She's an ambassador for domestic violence. She has rescued women and children from trafficking, all through she lost her young son, Andrew. And I don't know about you, Mon, I think we were both very moved by her story and about resilience, but also about looking at what can I do, not why is this happening to me. Incredible story, and I really urge everyone to listen in.
An outstanding story about taking yourself out of victim state and from, just surviving to thriving. And I really encourage listeners, if you've ever lost someone and wondered why, listen to this podcast. It's fantastic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Grit Diaries. Hey, Mon.
Hi, Maz. How are you today?
Fabulous. Oh, today, again, don't we just have some incredible guests on this show?
Sure do.
Oh, and this is
stories of resilience and excited about what's about to happen.
What a privilege we have, as you and I were saying, we come off these podcasts and these interviews and we're just like, oh my gosh, like it really fills our cup and we're just learning so much. And today is going to be no exception. I want to welcome here today, Lindsay Ziehl. Am I saying Ziehl correctly?
Yes, you are. It's Ziehl. A lot of people can't spell it correctly, but you said it absolutely perfectly.
Yes, we're off on a flying. So welcome to the Grit Diaries, Lindsay.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank
Lindsay.
you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, look, special gratitude. Lindsay is over in South Africa and it is past 11 p.m. at night recording this. Yes. So we're very grateful for you to be here to share your story with everyone. So just a little bit about Lindsay. Lindsay is a British-born humanitarian. She is an author and an advocate for women. She was actually raised in Australia. Spent a lot of her time in Melbourne and some in Sydney. She was actually crowned Miss Victoria in 1969. How good is that? I think I'm going to see if I can Google a photo of that. Over 25 international awards, as well as one from Queen Elizabeth for her work with domestic violence. She's regarded as one of the most experienced voices in domestic violence. For over 25 years, she has trained over 3,000 women and personally saved the lives of countless women and children. Through relentless intervention with ministers, police and senior officials, she has helped secure the release of trafficked women just one day before she was sent abroad. A two-time cancer survivor who endured the devastating loss of her beloved son, Andrew. She founded the foundation, Andrew Ziehl Foundation, and continues to fight fearlessly for those without a voice. So even just in that bio, I'm sure all of you are already tuning in, stopping what you're doing. And this beautiful lady has had one heck of a journey and we appreciate your willingness to share. So Lindsay, tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up for you and what's relevant to your story and your challenges and your resilience. What was happening in your young years and what were some poignant things that were happening at that time for you?
Well, my parents loved to travel, and we traveled a lot. So basically went to many schools in my lifetime. And I was trying to count how many the other day, and I couldn't find them all. So I couldn't write them on the bio. But my mother was a great traveler. She actually motivated us all to travel. My dad was very quiet. He was very book smart and came from an extremely poor family. He didn't have the opportunity to go to university when he was younger. And I think it was wonderful when he met my mum, because my mother came from upper middle class family. And she said, right, we're going to travel. And I think for my dad, that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it was for me too, because traveling really opens one's mind and you get to meet people from all different walks and all different cultures. But one of the things that my father always taught me was to be kind and help people, because he came from a very, very poor family. So he knew what it felt like not to have or to need help. And that was always told to me. And he always said, if somebody needs a hand, you have to help them. And I've had that in my heart all these years. So that was the basis of my young life. My mum and dad worked continually. My father had wonderful work ethic. And that is also something I learned from him as well. As I said, we moved to Sydney when I was extremely young, probably about 4 or 5. And we stayed in Bellevue Hill. And then we moved to Rose Bay. And we were there for about a year or so. And I traveled so much, I can't split up the time. I can't say we were there for 8 months or number. So I'm just going to run through it quickly. And we went back to the UK and we were there for about a year. And then we came back to Australia again because my mum and dad loved Australia. In that time, it was different schools, different schools, different schools. So I did have the opportunity to meet a lot of different people in my life, not only by traveling, but by the different schools and the different teaching methods. I think at an early age, my mother realized I would not be an intellectual.
How did you find, out of curiosity, for moving schools, making new friends? Was that exciting? Was it scary? What was that for you?
It actually wasn't scary for me because
It wasn't.
if you're used to doing something continually like that, it becomes part of your life. I would come home from school and my mother would have suitcases and she'd say, we're leaving and we're going off back to England for 6 months.
Can I ask a quick question? Yeah, what did they do? What were their occupations that allowed them the freedom to travel so much?
Well, wherever they went, they found work and they worked. I mean, my dad was a postman for a while. I think he was a postman in Australia. And a lot of the times we travel and then my father always had work. My father always worked. My mum then worked in Sydney. She was working in a coffee bar in Sydney for some Hungarian people, wonderful people. And then it would be, right, we're going to England, and then we would come back again. And then I was very small. I did some modelling as a child in Sydney with Pucci clothing, and I did some. There was so much that went on in my little life.
Yes.
As I say, we went back and forth and back and forth. So I didn't really have a lot of friends, and I was an only child. So I was used to being on my own most of the time. And you learn how to occupy your time yourself. So I think the first day of school is always the worst, but I had many of those first days and eventually it just came part of my life, So we went back and forth and then eventually we landed in Melbourne and we were in Melbourne for quite a few years actually. I enjoyed Melbourne, I have to say. I do love Melbourne. It's my home. Even though I haven't been in Australia for, I don't want to say this because it sounds really, really a long time. We left in 74.
52 years.
Oh, don't say it. Half a century ago. Yes, it was. Every year I watch the coming of the new year. And whenever I watch that, I get very tearful when I see that bridge. And that's it. The tears flow. I think because I spent so much of my youth in Australia, and this is where I did have a stable home for quite a few years. So I still have the accent. You may not hear it, but in South Africa, they say, why have you got an Australian accent? And I go, no, I haven't. And they say, yes, you have.
You do.
And then I phone a friend in Australia and they say, gosh, you've got a real South African accent there. And I go, no, I haven't. So I've got this mixture of everything going on here.
You have an Audrey Hepburn accent, which is described as continental. And I love it. Yeah, because you've got a little bit of English, a little bit, there's a little bit
Yes,
of this, a
yes,
dash of
yes.
this,
It sounds quite polished.
I desire a continental accent. That's what I would love.
So Lindsay,
It's
Well, I
beautiful.
still
It's
love yours.
absolutely beautiful, Lindsay.
Thank
what
you.
brought
Thanks.
you that beautiful growing up years? You embraced the travel and nomadic existence in the safety of your parents. How did you, if you could bring us sort of fast forward a little bit, and how did you end up over in Africa?
Well, I got married. I met a musician and we got married, and his family were living in Zambia. He was brought up in Zambia. His father was a manager of the mines in Zambia. And then they moved from Zambia down to Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe.
Mm.
And Andrew, my son, had been born. And he said, I'd like to go back to Africa and I want you to meet my mom and my dad and, bring Andrew and what have you. And we had a little dog as well. So we flew over to Rhodesia, to Zimbabwe. And we were there for, I'd say, about 6 to 8 months. The war was on in Rhodesia at that time. And his family were, not only his dad and his mom had been working on the mines, but they'd retired. But his other cousins were living in Zimbabwe and they were tobacco farmers. And most of them lived right out into the country. And we spent some time there, but it was very terrifying, actually, because when there's a war going, there were a lot of things that were going on there. And I wasn't used to that. So for me, it was very nerve wracking. And we left Zimbabwe and we came down to South Africa, spent some time in Johannesburg for a while. And then we actually spent some time in Cape Town as well, because I was an ice skater. I was a figure skater.
You're full of
And
surprises.
I did some shows in, I know there's a lot of stuff there you have to go through. It's like going through a forest. And there were some shows, ice shows in Cape Town. And I thought, oh, well, I might as well do those. So I did an ice show in Cape Town. And then we came back to Johannesburg, and then we eventually landed in Durban. And that's where we lived for a very, very long time. Durban is very much like Brisbane. It's very hot and very tropical and, lovely. So we lived there, and then we split. My husband just walked out one day, and you hear of people saying, I'm going off to buy a newspaper, and you never see them again. Well, he walked off and we never saw him again either. But I was working at that time. I always worked. And Andrew was at school. And so we sort of got along that way. And that's how we survived, really. It wasn't so much a survival. I mean, there's worse survival stories than mine out there. But at the time, it was quite difficult because there was only one salary coming in.
That's a big event. Did you just come home and he just literally just didn't turn up?
He just said to me, he said, look, because he used to travel quite a lot. He was a musician, but he was also working for a company. So he was traveling around, and he said, I'm going to travel a lot and I'll be back whenever. And he just never came back. And in a way, to be quite honest, it was a huge relief for me because it was not a great marriage. It was very, very difficult. And I stuck it out for 18 years. One always does for the children. You will say, oh, well, I need to stay for my son and what have you, which, as I've learned over the years, that's not necessary if you're not happy. And he never came back, and I never heard from him again. And I have no idea where he went or whatever. And it was only, it must be 3 years ago, somebody got hold of me and said to me, you do know that he's passed away? I said, no, I didn't know that. So that was it.
Yeah.
But I never got divorced. I just left it. I thought, well, I'm not going to get married again. And I just wanted to get on with my life and get on with Andrew's life so we could build a future. So I was working. Andrew was at school. He was doing extremely well. And he said to me one day, I want to go home. And I said, but you are home. And he said, no, home. I want to go back to Australia. I said, but you're only you're a little tiny child. You were like 2 or something when we left. And he said, no, I want to go home. And that was basically, your children have to fly. And that's what he wanted to do. And I said, fine. And that was it. I was working in domestic violence at that stage. He'd obviously gone to Australia a few years before that. And then he came to see me a couple of times in Port Elizabeth, because that's where I am, in PE, and would come out for about 3 or 4 weeks and then go back. And it's always hard, it pulls on your heart when your child leaves. And I hate those goodbyes. I don't act well with those.
Lindsay, I really wanted to highlight, sorry to interrupt you, something that you really had to dig deeply with. And I just wanted for the listeners and the viewers that when you're having to allow a child to live their dreams, what was that thing that for you that was really important when you had to just let him fly? Because I know that was really challenging for you.
I think because I had the opportunities when I was young to do what I wanted to do. When I'd won the Miss Victoria, we had to go overseas. We traveled by ship. We didn't travel by plane. We did a couple of plane trips in Europe, but I must have been at least 5 to 6 months going all over the world, basically, as a prize. So I had the opportunity to go and do what I wanted to do. And when Andrew said to me, look, I'd like to go home, did I want him to go? No. But unfortunately for me, he said, no, he did want to leave and he wanted to go home. And I said, fine. And it was heartbreaking for me, I have to say, because we were always together. And then suddenly he was gone. But he would fly over. Thank goodness for technology, because we could phone each other. We could go on Zoom and do all of these calls. But it's not quite the same as having that child, near you. The one thing about Andrew, he was the most wonderful, wonderful boy. And of course, he came out to South Africa a few times. And then the last time he was going to be coming out in 2021. And at the end of 2020, he was fine. We were talking on the phone and everything was going well. And he said, I'll speak to you next week. I said, fine. That was in November. And I remember trying to phone him and I couldn't get hold of him. And I went out with a friend of mine who lives here. She's an Australian from Sydney. And we were having tea and I said, this boy, I keep phoning him and he won't answer his phone. And it was probably about 2 days later, I had a phone call from a police officer in Pretoria. And he started asking me these questions. Do you have a son in Australia? And I said, yes. And then he said, does he live in Queensland? And I said, yes. And he said to me, where in Queensland? And I said, and this is when I started to get panic, because I said to him, listen, you're a police officer, you know all of this, so you should know where he lives. And he said, well, is his name Andrew? And I said, yes. And he said, I just have to tell you that your son has passed away. And that was it. There was no, I'm terribly sorry, or anything like that. It was just, your son is gone. I think different people handle grief differently. And I think for about a good 3 or 4 hours, I didn't know what to do. It was just like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Is it? And then I thought, no, it can't be real. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of started to hit me later and later and later. And I had somebody in Australia, a young man, wonderful young man. And I got hold of him and he said, look, I'll go round to the apartment. And he actually did everything because I couldn't get to Australia because of COVID.
Pandemic, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he did everything. And eventually, you don't ever get over losing a child, ever. People say it gets easier over time. Well, maybe it does for some, but for me, it doesn't. It doesn't, because every day I think of him, every day of my life. And somebody said, oh, but you're so strong. And I said, well, you don't see me all the time. You don't see me in the morning. You don't see me late at night. But it's something you never expect. I think one expects your parents to go before you. You expect it. You don't want it to happen, but you expect it. And I'd lost my mum a year earlier. Well, it wasn't even a year. It was about 9 months earlier. And it's not something that I had planned in my head, because you plan this like, oh, well, I'll go over at some stage to Oz, or Andrew's coming to me. And suddenly it just goes dead. It's not going to happen. So you can either sit and you can just say, I'm done, or you can try and sort of move. And you have to pull yourself together sometimes. You know, sometimes you don't feel like getting out of your pajamas. I don't want to get out of my pajamas. I just want to sit. And you get to the point where you have to push yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to get up. You've got to stand up. You've got to get dressed up. And you've got to get going. And that's what you have to do. You have to push yourself. But I'll never get over this. I will never get over it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to just say to the audience, if anyone is impacted by this, that please do reach out to Lifeline 131114. And Lindsay, I resonate very much. I think exactly the same period of time, lost my brother in Queensland in November 2020, and we were unable to see him as well. So I'm listening to you and thinking about my mum and thinking how it's not, it's just not the right order for your children to pass before you. It's not the right order.
But from everything that happens in your life, sorry,
It's all right.
You learn from this. And every time something happens in your life that overwhelms you, that you think, I don't know if I'm going to get through this, you learn and you do. And that learning helps you help somebody else.
Yes.
And it helped me a great deal, not only to decide to start a foundation in Andrew's name, but from his death, I learned things that Andrew did that I never knew. I had calls from people who I didn't know, who said to me, you have no idea what Andrew did for us. You have no idea how much he helped us. You have no idea that he would phone us every birthday.
Oh. Yeah.
And, and I had a lady phone me and said, you have no idea that Andrew, I couldn't afford for my daughters to go to a concert. And he went and bought tickets and gave. He did so much that I didn't know about, that he never spoke about. He never talked about it. And there were so many people that contacted me and said, you have no idea what Andrew did for us. So then I thought, well, I better do something for people too. And that's when I started the foundation. And that's what I get up for every day.
Yeah.
Because if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have started a foundation. I wouldn't. But because of Andrew, there is that there now. And to show people that I can carry on what he left, what he was starting, I will continue with. So there we go.
Lindsay, as Simone is very well known for her phrase and lives it, is turning your pain into purpose. And there is no question the depths of the agony that you've experienced. And thank you for, really being vulnerable enough to share that with ourselves and the audience. And even just to highlight the fact, and perhaps there's people out there listening to this at the moment and going through their own intense parts of their grief, that I really wanted to highlight what you shared, and that was sometimes you've just got to stand up. You've got to change your pajama pants. You've got to go to the bathroom. I can certainly relate in a particular period of my life. You know, I was always an avid swimmer. Some days it was just getting in the car and just going to the beach. I didn't have to go in the water. I just had to get in the car. And eventually it was now just sit on the grass and look at the pool. Now it was get in. You don't have to go and do your 20 laps. You just have to literally just get in the pool, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Eventually it morphed into lap and starting to find yourself again in time, but just allowing
Yes.
yourself to just incrementally. But like you say, sometimes you have to push yourself. You do.
You have to, you know. You've got to wake up, get up and get out and get dressed
Yeah.
and
Yes.
prove
Yeah.
yourself. And you sometimes don't feel that. But I would like to say if there's somebody out there that is going through grief, and I know there's a lot of people going through grief, take as long as you like to grieve.
Mm.
If you're going to grieve for the next 20 years, grieve for 20 years.
Mm.
If you feel that's what's needed, then you do it because you have to. You have to do it for yourself. But through that, you will learn. You learn so much. Like people always say, you learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, you do, but you learn from heartbreak as well. And you learn from grief. You
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Pain's the best teacher, unfortunately.
yeah.
Yeah. Grief is nature's way because we will all experience it at some point to varying degrees. And so it's nature's changing of seasons, whether we liked it or not, but we're not meant to be the same. Grief is meant to change us. And so not fighting that tide.
Well, I always look at it that if I'm left behind, I'm left behind for a reason.
Mm.
And maybe I need to fulfill that or find the reason I'm here.
Lindsay, we appreciate you and we really want to acknowledge such a deeply felt, profound loss that you've had, particularly being your one and only beautiful child. And again, for those of you that are out there that are perhaps struggling with your own version of grief right now, please, as Mon has mentioned, please reach out to your local agency, whether that's Lifeline, wherever you're listening in from. Please reach out to some trained professionals that are there to support you. There is so much in your story that we have not tapped in. Again, you are one of those beautiful guests that we would absolutely love to have on for a part 2 on all of this, purely for time. You have gone on, and at the age of 60, you went back to university and you got your counselling degree, I believe, and have gone on to help thousands of women and children from being trafficked, from helping them from abuse situations, and gone on to train, what was it, 3,000 people to yeah. Do you want to speak a bit about that before we go into your nuggets of wisdom? I don't want to brush over just the extraordinary life that you have lived since this tragedy.
Well, after I left Durban, came to Port Elizabeth to start my journey with the domestic violence, and the shelters that I was working with had 3 houses. One was like an interim home where if a woman has to come in during the night with the police, she's got a place to come to. And then we had a safe house where people that are in danger, that need longer than a night or whatever, we had a longer shelter for that. And then we had a halfway house for women that have been through all of that, can go to a halfway house, find a job, stay there for a while, and then move on. That's the backstory there. And when I moved in, because I'd had a bit of training, I said to the people who were on the board, I said, we need to train these ladies here in some sort of courses so that if they have to work, we can help them with computer training and things like this so that they can move on. Because a lot of women that are in abusive situations sometimes don't work. They're not allowed to work. So they can't go out and find a job. But when they leave, they need to because they've got children to look after. And we need people to become independent. And we never wanted people to live with us in a shelter for months and months and months and months because they become dependent on us. Mm. And that's not good for them. And so I said to them, I need to start training. And they said, yeah, but we don't have computers and we don't. I said, no, I'll go to Rotary. So I went to Rotary and I spoke to Rotary in PE, Rotary Club of Algoa Bay. I'll give them an ad. And I said, look, this is what we need. We need sewing machines. We need computers. We need pens, pencils. We need material. We need all sorts of things for training. And they said to me, okay, what do you want? I said, well, look, just start off with one computer, and because I didn't want to be greedy. And so in the one house, we set up all these chairs, sort of cinema fashion, and we would have women coming for training, computer training, just the basic stuff. Basically, what I use, the basic stuff. And we would teach them on the one computer, and then one would get up and you'd say, no, you do it, and this and this and this. And eventually, we were getting some women also from the outlying areas, and they wanted to be trained too. And we'd say, okay, if we've got room, we can do that. So eventually we got a whole stack of computers, we got sewing machines, we got a whole lot of stuff. And over the years, we trained about 3,000. Myself, I brought somebody else in to train. If we wanted something like in baking or cookery or something like that, I'd get somebody in because I'm no good at that. And we brought a lady in to teach sewing because I'm no good at that either.
You and me, babe.
And I tried the computer stuff. But we did that, and we trained like 3,000 people. And they would each get a certificate at the end of the course. And to see a woman who is totally broken down, who has never worked, doesn't have skills, to go through training, that certificate is like gold.
Yeah.
The pride there, with the pictures and the ladies holding up their certificates. And they're very, very proud of that. A lot of them, when they left the shelter, I wouldn't see them for years. And all of a sudden I'd be walking down the road and somebody go, hi, Lindsay. And I go, hello. Hello, how are you? And they said, don't you remember me? Because they're so different.
Yeah.
Their whole character, the way they stand and they walk and their confidence is different because they're out there and they're doing their thing and they're happy. So that's basically how we did it. And we trained lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And eventually we had people coming in to do sort of handicrafts as well, teaching handicrafts, because, we're in Africa and there's not a lot of work here. So a lot of people want to become entrepreneurs. So we wanted people to start their little businesses themselves, and women did. So that was very successful and very, very proud of that. But with the foundation that we're doing now, we won't be doing that. We'll actually be helping people to go to a college to study or go to a place to learn how to bake and cook, and a place to go where they can learn to sew and so forth. We won't be doing it ourselves so that they can go to colleges.
Amazing. Just such a turnaround and making a choice, making very deliberate decisions to really pour back into, what, you started with at the beginning of this conversation was your dad's ethic to work, his work ethic, but also to be kind and to help other people. That, you're obviously doing that throughout your whole life, but that has clearly become quite a full circle, sort of, those things that your dad valued, and you are living that out exponentially. I think, what really is sort of around at the moment in social media, and, it's never too late to begin. It's never too late, at the age of 60, you're going to university, you are still impacting lives and making such a big difference. So I think that really speaks to, no one's hung out to dry. We've all got value. We've all got gifts that we can continue to give.
I say to people, they say to me, but, how old are you now? And I go, I am 77. And I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
Because I'm sort of planning ahead. I'm still planning ahead to do things. And that's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
You just don't give up. They always say retire, and I always say retire and expire.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to expire. So, and as I say, I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. So,
yeah, I don't like the word retire.
And I hate it when people turn around and go, "Oh, but you're only 77 years young." That doesn't make sense. I'm 77. Leave it at that. I'm fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So we really want to share with the audience, Lindsay, there are two quite significant nuggets of wisdom that you've shared with us. I'm sure you have 1,000 more, but if you can just share with the audience what those incredible nuggets of wisdom is that they can use themselves.
Well, the one was when my son died, I didn't know what to do. And like most people, you don't know which way to turn, and you really want to know why. Why did it happen to me? Why did it happen to him? He was so young and so healthy, and he was good. He wasn't bad. He was a good boy. And so I went to the rabbi and I said to him, "Look," I said, "this is what's happened, and I just want to know why it's happened. Why does God allow this to happen?" And he looked at me and he said, "Don't say why." And I went, "Why?" He said, "What you need to say to yourself now is what?" And I said, "I don't understand." He said, "Would your son like to see you as you are now?" And I said, "No." He said, "Then you must say, what now, not why." And that has stuck with me. And often I go, "Oh, why me?" through silly things. And then I go, "No, what now? What am I going to do now?"
What can I do now? I love that, Lindsay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that
It
actually
takes you
changed.
immediately. It does. It takes you immediately out of kind of that victim, poor me, doesn't it?
He said, "Your son will be proud of you. Carry on. What now? Do more." And that was what pushed me to start the foundation, really, was those few words as well. And then, of course, my other thing that happened to me was when I was going through cancer, the second bout. The first wasn't breast cancer, but the second was breast cancer. And I used to have to catch a bus. I was living right up on the border of Mozambique, and I had to get a bus to go to the hospital to have chemo. And that would take 4 hours or so. It's a long way. And it was a schlep, but it had to be done, and I had to do it. So I would go on this bus, a big bus, little bus, and they would drop me off at the bus station, and I'd walk and I'd get to the hospital, which wasn't very far away, go into the hospital, go to the cancer department, sit for a while just so they know you're there, because then they mix up all your chemo. They won't do it beforehand because it's so expensive. So they do it once you're there. You wait for an hour for that to be done, and then you sit for a couple of hours for it to go through. Once it's done, then you sit for a bit, you have a ginger biscuit or two or whatever you feel like at that stage. And then I used to walk back to the bus station and I would sit. And that would usually be about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the bus usually came at 5. So I would sit at the bus station. And there was this one day that I was sitting there feeling really sorry for myself. Another one of those why me things. And I'm sitting there and I go, "Oh, I don't know why this is all happening to me. And I have to travel this far and I feel terrible. And now this is," and I didn't know whether I was going to live because I'd had this cancer for a very long time. Nobody told me what it was. And I went to several doctors and they all said, "No, don't worry about it." But in your gut, I think women have a very good intuition. And there was just something that kept saying to me, no, there's something not right. And I eventually went to another doctor, and it was about the 4th doctor. And I took off my shirt and he just said, "I know what's wrong with you. You have Paget's disease." And I said, "What?" He said, "You have to go to the hospital. You've got to go and have the tests," which I did do. So anyway, so I went to the hospital. They did all the tests. Yes, I had to have my breast removed. I had to have chemo first. Then I had the breast removed. And no, I actually had the breast removed. Then I had the chemo. I was sitting at the bus station and it was a lovely day, lovely sunny day, and it was very quiet. And that this truck arrived, and it was an open, we call them buckies here, but it was an open truck at the back. And stuck on the back was all these frozen chickens. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh, frozen chickens, and it's warm. You hear about chicken. And the gentleman who was driving the truck obviously needed to go to the gents, to the bathroom. And he got out of his truck, and I'm sitting there, and out of the corner of my eye, there were some bushes on the other side of the little road. This little cat, this little black and white cat came running out, tiny little thing. And I watched this cat, and it jumped on the back of this truck, and it grabbed a frozen chicken in its mouth, and it jumped off, and it was one hell of a thud. And this chicken was nearly as big as the cat, and it must have been heavy because it was frozen. And it ran away, and this thing was swinging, and it ran back into the bushes, and it was taking it to its kittens. And I sat there and I thought, if that little cat can carry something so heavy for those little kittens, why am I sitting here feeling sorry for myself? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what my mother used to say. And just get on with it. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Just move on. Get on with it. You're alive. Get on with it. And that story of that cat has lived with me for years. And it was so powerful, that little thing running off with this huge chicken because it had to, because it was feeding its kittens that it loved. And it would go to any length to help those kittens. And I thought, well, if that cat can do it, I can do it too. I can be as strong as that cat. So that stays with me for years and years. So that was one of the things that I've actually got in my book. I'm writing my autobiography at the moment, and that's going to be the title of my book.
The cat that got the...
So, and it's all about...
What's the title going to be, Lindsay?
It's a cat, a frozen chicken, and chemo. And that's just... Yeah. That's the title.
Yeah, love it. A great story. That one will stay with me for a lifetime.
I'm with you, Mon, the cat story. And I love the way that, I'm just going back to what you've kindly sent us. The cat, she didn't ask why the chicken was so heavy. She simply carried it, which I think that was the thing I've highlighted it here. Strength is not measured by the weight you carry, but by the love that makes you carry it. Oh, yes. I just got little chills.
And as you say, not why, but what now? I really
Yes.
like that. And I think all of us have a tendency to go into a victim state from time to time. And yeah, that one resonates with me very much so.
It's
What
human.
now? Yeah, thank you, Lindsay.
But I think it's human for us to sometimes feel sorry for ourselves. And that's okay. But we mustn't get carried away and just sit in bed every day for a week.
Yeah,
we mustn't do that. We've just got to get up and get out and do what we've got to do.
Yeah, get our boots on. Thank you. That's been just the most amazing time, Lindsay Ziehl.
Thank you, Lindsay, for being with us on the Grit Diaries. We know that your sharing will impact many that will be watching, and we hope that one day we might actually meet. That'd be amazing.
Yes. Well, if I can come over to Aussie, I'll sprint over the pond from South Africa. On the map, it doesn't look that far, but it's a long way. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
You can find Lindsay on Kintsugi Heroes or in the show notes. And we wish you well. And thank you once again, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, even though it's 12 o'clock at night. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Mon.
Thanks, Maz. Thanks,
Bye.
Lindsay. Thank you for joining us on the Grit Diaries, From Grit to Grace. If today's story has moved you, share it with someone who needs a little hope. Remember, from grit, we can find grace, and from grace, we can find inspiration. Until next time, look for the joy, keep safe, stay grounded, and never forget that there is a strength within your own story. Take care.